one thing that I tell leaders all the time, being, having empathy is like this huge thing. And I'm like, no, I want you to move away from empathy because empathy just means you can relate to me.
Mhm.
What if you can't relate to me?
Now
The
what?
same thing with allyship. We're like, oh, I'm an ally. I understand you. What if you can't understand me? You haven't walked in my shoes. You haven't had the same experiences. So I don't need your empathy. I need your compassion because the compassion is, I see you hurting. What can I do to ease your pain?
Mm, Kingdom principle.
Exactly.
Welcome to Kingdom Over Everything. I am your host and Chief Fire Igniter, Shae Bynes. Now, before we get into this episode, I want to do a little bit of a warning because this is the first episode of this show that touches on not one, but two hot buttons, both race and politics. So I want to give you two encouragements before we get started. First is, if there's anything that's said during this episode that really agitates you, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do what I like to call a holy pause. And I want you to seek God around the thing that's agitating you and see what he has to say to you about what's agitating you. And then instead of being reactive, perhaps in the comments, you can be responsive if you want to share and we can actually engage. So that's number one. And then number two is remember that the atmosphere that we are creating here with this show is all about helping us all to grow and having a kingdom over everything lens. So that means kingdom over race and kingdom over politics. All right. So remember, that's the culture that we're creating here. So I want you to keep those things in mind. And now listen in, watch, enjoy this conversation that I had with Dr. Kimberly Harden about a holistic approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Kimberly Harden's in the house. What is going on?
Hi, Shay. How are you?
I'm doing great. And thank you for hanging out with me today. This is only our second conversation ever, but when I asked, I did a call out on Facebook, on my LinkedIn, and I'm like, I want to talk to somebody who's a kingdom person, but is operating in this space of diversity, equity, inclusion. Who should I talk to? And I think three people. I think three different people in relatively short order all mentioned your name. So this is clearly your
That's
space. And so,
awesome.
so thank you. Thank you for hanging out with me today.
My pleasure. And thank you to them. So that's good.
Absolutely. All right. So let's dig in. I want to know more about you and your story and even how you ended up in this space. I know that you are in North Carolina now, but talk to me a little bit about kind of the journey that's led to now.
Oh, my goodness. So, I'm a former college professor, and I used to tell my students all the time that life is not linear. I, did the whole zigzaggy thing for years.
Yes.
So even before I became a professor, I was working in corporations, in healthcare specifically. So I worked in nonprofit healthcare, I worked in hospitals. And so I was kind of doing DEI before DEI was a thing.
The hot topic.
Right. Exactly. So, back then it was, I was a program assistant for a nonprofit healthcare organization, an international organization. And then I went into community relations, and that's kind of what DEI started out as: community engagement, community relations, really helping physicians, um, you know, bring in more people of color to be their patients, helping them tailor treatments and things like that. So even when
Wait,
I was in school,
share a little bit about that. You said Taylor treatments for. Talk a little bit about that. What was the focus or the need from that perspective?
yes, yes. And so the need was, working in healthcare and also doing research, discovering how physicians tend to speak over people's head. They use that medical jargon,
Right.
and the average person reads at a fourth grade level. So when you're talking to your doctor and they're talking about, hypertension and glucose and all of these things, and people are looking at you like, what in the world are they talking about?
Right. I didn't go to med school. Help me out here.
Right. So we would just break it down and say you have high blood pressure and you have sugar, right? Because most people are, they immigrated to Northwest, and so they're from the South, and so they understand the term "you have sugar."
What city and state were you in at this time?
Seattle, Washington.
In Seattle, Washington, that was so
Yes.
that was a lingo because people from because I thought that was a whole Southern thing. So you're saying
No.
that's
So most of the Black people in Seattle aren't from Seattle.
okay, because they were
They're
transplants,
transplants.
basically. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Right,
Right.
right. So even if they were born and raised there like I was,
Yes.
well, my mother was from Stuttgart, Arkansas, and my dad was from Sparta, Georgia.
Oh, I see, I see.
So
Right. So you got
they
Southern
have that.
transplants with their whole cultural language. So for those who
Exactly.
have no idea what we're talking about, so instead of diabetes, sugars. Okay.
Yeah,
All right, keep
yes.
going, keep going.
Instead of saying you have hypertension, you have high blood pressure.
Right.
Right. And so all of those kind of things. And so just doing the research and speaking to doctors and looking at the medical material. And I said, you know what? We really need to work on improving health communication. And so that was actually my background.
Yeah.
I got my bachelor's in communication because I was working on health communication projects and working at the nonprofit. We really designed and tailored material for different audiences. And so we would go out and we would pre-test it. So we designed some materials for the Latina community and for, the Ukrainian community and African American community. And we would go to these specific communities and pre-test it to one, make sure that they understood it, to see if the design was culturally appropriate, and all of those kind of things. And so that was the missing piece. You can't just give everyone
The same
the
thing.
same piece of material and expect everyone to have the same knowledge,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so we found that in the Latina community, they wanted designs that were more whimsical. And so for this particular product that they created, we designed a brochure that actually had a graphic, a cartoon of a woman floating among the stars,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Which is very interesting.
Yes, it
When I
is.
showed that to the Black community, they were like, we don't want that.
Like, that's not resonating with us,
That's not resonating, right?
but it was a
And then
win.
the Ukrainian community, their colors are yellow and green. And so we had to redesign the material to fit their preferred color scheme.
Right, right.
So it's the same content, just designed differently in a way that's receptive to them,
Yes. And
culturally
this was on
respectful.
behalf of like a medical health center. So the idea is we want people to come into the center to get the health care that they need. And so we need to
Right,
reach them in a way that
right.
connects them and helps them see that we see you, and
Absolutely.
almost like a creating that beginning bridge of trust essentially.
Absolutely. And then also the partnerships. And so the thing that I did as part of my college project was reaching out to the local barbershop, which was probably 2 to 3 miles from the hospital.
Right.
And so his name was Earl's Barbershop on Union Street at the time. And I went down and I said, well, Mr. Earl, can we put up some materials in your barbershop? And he was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And then the men started having conversations about healthcare in the barbershop.
Yes.
And so that was my little contribution. It's like, okay, we want to improve healthcare among specific communities. We need to meet them where they're at.
Right.
And Black people are nail salons, well, hair salons mostly,
Yes,
hair
yes.
salons, barbershops. Asian Americans, particularly Vietnamese, nail salons, right? So we figured out where to target the audience and make
Yes.
the materials culturally receptive.
And at that time, that was essentially called like community outreach or community communications or something like
Right,
that. Yeah.
right,
Okay,
right.
cool. So, all right. So take me past that. So you were doing that work. Then what?
So I did that for many years, and then I started working with people who had no clue how to interact with Black women, and they
I feel
were
like there's a story
mostly.
there.
Yeah, they were mostly white men, and they would graduate from college and come in and just be, a lot of microaggressive comments and all of the things. And would have to pull their coattail and be like, I don't know who you think you're talking to. I don't get down like that. And let me explain to you why you're being disrespectful, not just to me, but to a whole community of people. And so I realized that I needed to meet them where they were at in school.
Yeah. This was at a university setting.
This was still in the
This
hospitals.
was still in the hospitals you were
This
experiencing
was in
this.
the
Okay.
hospitals, yes, and so I decided to go into teaching, um, just because I told my students this when they asked me, "Why did I start teaching?" I said, "Because I needed to teach you how not to be jerks."
Wow.
And so, of course, again, Washington State had very few African American female teachers, so they didn't have that experience
Right.
of interacting with someone. And so, when I got into teaching, I started out teaching at the junior college, and then I went into the university. And I always ask students, how many of you have ever had a Black teacher? And I had to reflect myself. I didn't have my first Black teacher until high school.
Same. Yeah, same with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot to be learned from Black women, and we miss that because we didn't see that. We
Right.
didn't have that representation. And so I wanted to be that representation for students
Yeah.
and, adults when they got into the workplace, and teach them how to not be jerks.
So, the class that you were teaching, what was the title of the class? Like, what was the
So
subject?
I was a communications professor. So it was, intro to communication,
Yes.
small group communication, public speaking. Um, what else did I teach? And then when I went to the university, I started teaching social justice. So the first course in social justice was African Americans and Asian Americans, because there's that stereotype that we don't get along.
Yes, yes.
And so I was like, that's not true. That's a
Right.
myth. Let's unpack this. And so that was my first social justice course. And then the next year, and for I think 3 years after that, I taught Black women in the social justice movement. And so we just went through the history of Black women, and how, almost everything that we've ever done has been co opted, as you probably know. And so
Now, what
we
year is this? Like, give me a time frame. So, when were you teaching this topic?
I taught this topic, I started this in 2017, I believe.
So, this is
2017,
2017.
2018.
And so these topics, and even kind of the topic around social justice, the conversations around social justice, I don't know at what point they got hot. Was it maybe 2016 when they started to get hot, and then it just got super hot, red hot at 2020?
It didn't really get hot until 2019,
Okay, okay.
right before George Floyd. So,
Well,
like,
that happened in 2020, so the George
right, but so
right.
it started wrapping up
Oh,
right
I
before
see.
that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, cool. So you're teaching on these topics,
Mhm.
2016, 2017, and then eventually you went in because now you're doing consulting. So did you go right from university into consulting, or maybe you'd even do both now? I'm not sure.
So I actually started consulting while I was at the university.
Okay.
It was not my intention to become a consultant, honestly. Um, so the invisible labor that's often put on Black female professors is, hey, we need you to talk about this at such and such time, such and such date, with no extra pay.
Is it a topic concerning the Black community specifically? Usually?
No, that particular topic was, they were having their first, and to my understanding, still their only.
Right.
This was back in 2019. The university decided to have a uh, what they called industry and inclusion day. That's
Oh,
what it's
I
called,
see. Okay,
industry
okay.
and inclusion. So it was sponsored by the Career Services Office. They brought in all of these attendees. So we had people from Zillow and Microsoft, and the big organizations and companies in Seattle.
Yeah.
And so they asked me to give a keynote, and I'm like, a keynote on what? Like, I teach communication. Like, what do you want me to talk about?
Right.
Well, whatever you want to do. Okay.
That might have been the dangerous answer.
And so after, noodling and praying about it, I ended up they had me do two sessions, two keynotes in one day. And the session was on, my topic was employing differently,
Employing differently.
employing differently. Because we know that, white men tend to get the jobs,
Was
but of
this in
course it
tech?
depends.
Wait, was this a industry specific commentary, by the way? No? Okay,
No,
generally. Okay, go.
just
Keep
generally.
going. Sorry.
And so I talked about how white men tend to apply for jobs even if they're not qualified. I mean, they can have 20% of the job description and they're
Sure.
still going to apply. And most of the time, they're going to get the job. And a lot of times, there's nepotism involved. So we talked about that. We talked about how, we can improve the job descriptions, how we can, improve the interview process, how to improve the follow up process, all of the things that's job related. and it was really, really well received. And so at the end of that, so literally, I gave a keynote, ran across the street, taught my class on social justice,
Right.
came back,
Yes.
gave another keynote, ran back across the street to teach my other class with no extra benefits.
You're like, "I already know I said that once, and Imma say it again. I'm making a point
Right.
here."
But
That's
you know,
hilarious.
God is good. And
Yeah, he
and
is.
so the even though I didn't have like monetary benefits from the university,
Yes.
my first client ended up being Microsoft.
Wow.
And the person who brought me into Microsoft is like, I attended your session. I loved it. We would love for you to do the session for Microsoft. Okay.
Was this before was
Um,
that like the beginning was that the catalyst for the business start, or had you already started the business at that point?
no. So that was like the intro.
Okay, okay,
I was not really so this happened in May of 2019.
okay.
My mother passed away in January of 2019. And 5 days before my mother passed away, she says, "I need you to start your business."
Mm,
And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" But when you're a full-time care provider, my mom was disabled and had a lot of health issues. And so literally I'm taking care of her full time
right,
and teaching full time. I had
right,
no bandwidth to do anything else.
right.
And during that time, I had just completed my doctorate degree. So going to school full time, taking care of her full time, and teaching full time.
Yeah.
And I was literally surviving off of 4 hours of sleep a night, 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night.
Wow.
I gained so much weight because I was not taking care of myself.
Yeah,
Up at, you're working until 2 o'clock in the morning, you realize, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten. So what do? You go eat a bowl of cereal, which
yeah.
is carbs and sugar. And so, my weight just skyrocketed. And so, before she passed away, she says, "I need you to start your business." And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I just put it off the back burner.
Right.
And
And you hadn't
then
been
these
thinking about business, so that seems was seemingly random.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so the opportunities started to pop up. But then I realized, I'm like, well, you've already kind of developed your business, because my last corporate job is I was teaching full part-time at the university. Well, I was actually full-time at the community college, but I wasn't teaching till the summer. So I was like, I need to get a temporary job during the summer. So I ended up working at Starbucks. And it's funny that you like
So we're just been
Starbucks.
talking like we're hanging at Starbucks, yes.
Right. And so I did that for the summer, working at Starbucks headquarters. And it was a slow period. And so literally, I got out some colored Sharpies and designed how I want my business to go,
Yes.
not realizing that that's exactly how my business would go.
Wow.
And my mother never knew that I had actually, I never shared this with anybody.
That was just a private thing, like, I'm over here kinda dreaming a little bit around what might be possible, and then mom
Exactly.
flowing in the spirit. It's like, "You need to start
It,
working on your business."
that's a whole different conversation, because my mother, when I say she flowed in the spirit, my mom,
Tell me about her.
oh my goodness. So there was a whole, I believe that people know when they're going to pass away.
Yeah.
And so even when my dad passed away, like for a couple of weeks, he was like, "Take care of your mother, do this, do that." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, I take care of both of you now. Like, you're tripping, dad."
Yeah.
And literally the morning that my dad passed away, I was laying in bed. I had the morning off, and I said, "I'm gonna make daddy a lemon cake." And as soon as that thought entered my mind, my mom called and she said, "Daddy's gone." And I
Wow.
said, "Gone where?" Because he was such an early riser. Like, it was common for him to go to the doctor or whatever at 7 o'clock in the morning. She was like, "He's gone." I'm like, "Gone where?" And it took a minute. Probably it felt like a full minute for it
Yeah.
to click. And I just started screaming, because I was like,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Why didn't you tell me that you were gonna?" But I realized that had he told me he was gonna pass away, I would have been like, "You're tripping." Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So so when my mom got sicker, she was in the kitchen taking her insulin, and she just started crying. And I'm like, "What's wrong?" She's like, "Please don't put me in a nursing home." And I said, "I will be with you when you take your last breath."
Mm.
And then, like, later on, she was like, "I'm going to be gone in 6 months." And I'm like, "You're just talking foolishness." Lo and behold, 6 months later,
Wow.
my mom was getting ready for her doctor's appointment. And she says, I don't feel well. Can you call and reschedule? I'm like, yeah, I'll call. And I called the doctor and they're like, we're booked up for the next couple of months. So I went to her room and I said, you have to get ready to go. Literally, I turned my back to walk out the room and I turned her back around and she was having a stroke and her face had shifted.
Right.
And I said, she is not going to survive this. And so I'm trying to get her dressed. We're making so much noise in the apartment that my neighbor downstairs, she's like, what's going on? I'm like, my mom's having a stroke. Didn't want to call the ambulance because they take forever. They ask you a zillion questions. I'm like, I don't have time for that. Like,
Right.
so my neighbor in her pajamas hops in the back seat. I'm in the car. We're speeding, grace of God. I'm literally probably going like 105 rush hour traffic in the freeway.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm detouring, zigzagging, all of that. Didn't hit anybody, didn't get pulled, none of that. So by the time I was detouring up the hill, by this point, we're like probably 10 minutes away from the hospital. And my mom had her hand on the emergency brake and I moved her hand and she started squeezing my hand. And I was trying not to cry. And I said, you've been a good mother. So if it's your time to go, I
Mm.
bless you. And she died in the car.
Wow, Kimberly.
And so when the ambulance finally caught up with us, they were trying to act like she wasn't already gone. But I worked at the hospital that I was taking her to. So I already,
Yes.
the hospital that I was taking her to, they had started a stroke center when I was working there.
Yeah.
We went out to the community and educated Black folks about strokes.
Yes.
So it's like, y'all can't really tell me anything because
Yeah.
I already know,
Yeah. And
right?
she knew.
And she knew. And
Yeah.
so that Saturday before she passed away on a Wednesday, that Saturday, she wanted to go see her grandchildren. So we did that and we were driving back home and my mom lit up her cigarette and rolled down the window and she's like, let me tell you what the good Lord loves. And I'm like, oh geez, what? What did I miss? Like what happened? Like was there a conversation that I missed out on? And she just
Yeah.
started like telling me all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, huh? What? And everything that my mom said was gonna happen happened.
Yeah. You
Exactly the
saw
way
stuff and
she said it
heard
was gonna
stuff.
happen. I was like, "Huh?"
Yeah.
And then she was like, "This person is jealous of you. This person's gonna start some drama." Just like everything she said
Wow.
happened. And she was like,
Wow.
"I need you to start your business."
Wow. So you so now when you heard that and you're thinking, "Okay, wait a second. I didn't tell her about the fact that I had my markers out." Was that for
Mm-mm,
you the confirming moment that's like, "I have got to start this business?" Was that just like, "That's it for you? I gotta start this and I'm gonna start right now," or no? No.
mm-mm. I honestly, I forgotten that I had even written anything down.
Oh, wow.
It was
Wow.
in my box
Yes.
of keepsakes with all of the cards that I received from students over the years, and I just put it out of my mind. It
Wow.
wasn't until that April when I did the presentation at the university, and then when Microsoft called me, and I was like, oh, I guess I should go get my business license. And so literally, I had that experience in April. I got my business license on May 7th.
Oh my
So
gosh. That's so wild, when you talk about God being Jehovah Jireh, the one who sees and goes before. It's like you had that moment, all that time back there, forgot about it, and then right at the opportune time, it's like, oh, you didn't even were thinking about that. Your mom gives you that message, and then by the
mhm,
time that God's orchestrated a whole client for you and a starting point, you already had a framework or like an idea, a thought for what
mhm,
this business was going to look like. That's so
right.
cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about what you do in the consulting business, and then we'll talk some DEI related stuff. But talk to me about this consulting business and how you're serving and all of this.
We do a lot of things that a lot of consultants don't do. So, we do the organizational assessments, we do strategy work with the leaders, we do staff trainings and presentations, we do leader workshops, we do leader retreats, we do a lot more keynote. I do a lot more keynote speaking now.
Yeah.
Just a lot of workshops.
Yeah.
Companies will say, hey, can you come in and give a staff talk about X, Y, and Z for 90 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, if we have availability, that's what we'll do. But we have people on our team that does HR work,
Hmm.
so if they need help on revising policies. Laura will take that on. If they want to talk about, equity and LGBTQ issues and all of those things, I
Yeah.
have people that will take that on as well. So we it's a full stop shop.
Nice. So when clients come to you, they're not always coming to you from the perspective of a diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation. It could be a general workforce issue
Hmm.
or leadership, organizational strategy, and those types of things too. But there's this
Yeah,
particular topic that has become hotter as we've been talking about. So I
yeah.
guess are you seeing an increase of clients that are wanting you, whether it's from a speaking perspective or a consulting perspective, wanting to really hone in on this topic around diversity, equity, and inclusion from a workplace, marketplace context?
So they did. Unfortunately, things are, since it's been a couple of years since Floyd was murdered, things have calmed down. And you probably have seen some articles about how, most VPs of DEI at this point in time, 76% of them are white people.
Eh,
So,
I did not know that. I didn't hear
yes,
about that actually.
yes, yes. And so, we're going through this transition again. But just like it transitioned from community engagement to DEI, it's going to morph into something else. It
Yeah.
always does.
That's
Uh,
interesting.
yeah.
That's interesting. Okay,
So,
so help me out cuz even how sometimes we hear a phrase and you see it but then there's a whole lot of different definitions and perspectives on it. So I don't know whether there's even an entity that gets to control the definition or has created the space for that definition, but what exactly is it for someone who works in the space?
so there's so many acronyms.
Right.
It started out as DI, D and I, diversity and inclusion,
Okay.
and then it went to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then it went to DEIA or DIA,
Oh, I don't know this one.
diversity, yeah, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility,
Oh, okay.
and then it went to DEIB, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and
Oh,
now it's and I've even seen some terms JEDI, which is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
this is
So
morphing before our very eyes right now. Okay,
exactly,
okay, okay, okay,
exactly.
cool.
So it basically just means in different consultants have their different ideas
Yeah.
of and definitions, but for me, the whole idea of diversity, well, we're all diverse,
Yes.
right? And so, you and I both identify as Black women, but you are wearing some red glasses. I don't have any. Are they red or orange?
They are red.
Okay. So, and I don't have red glasses. I have some orange ones, right? We both had different hairstyles, all of those things. We're both in different geographical locations. So you're looking at the intersectionality. So by definition, we're all diverse.
Yes.
What companies are doing when they say we're looking for diversity is that means they're just looking to hire a particular segment of people.
Mhm.
And so what I do is I go in and I question them and I challenge them. Okay, so you want to hire diversity. Well, what does
What
that
does
mean
that
to the
even mean to
organization?
you? Right.
Right. What does that mean? Like which demographic? Why that demographic? How is that going to benefit that community? How is that going to benefit the organization? How are people already in the organization going to push back on that? Right. So we have those kind of conversations.
Yes.
Don't just say we want to hire diversity because if that's the case, you can just hang up a sign, a shingle saying we're hiring all Black folks. We're hiring all Asian folks. Right.
Right,
So
right.
you have to be very specific in what it is you're wanting and why.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
so I have those kind of conversations. Like, you want diversity? Okay, great.
Like,
Why?
let's define what that actually means. And I love that you're like, "What is it and why?" I love that you're engaging them at that level, right? So,
Mhm.
okay, I love that. Okay.
Yeah, and
So
oftentimes they'll say they don't know,
well,
right?
that's what I figured. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I figured, and that's
yeah,
when you really have to then have fuller conversations. I suspect the same then applies when you're even talking about a organizational leadership and wanting to help with team development and all of those things and teach an entire leadership team or entire group team and they're saying, "Well, we want to focus on diversity or we want to help in diversity." It's like, "Okay, what does that mean to you?
right.
Why? What are the issues that you're experiencing in the organization amongst the
Exactly.
people so that then you can kind of deal with that as it is?" Because it almost
Mhm.
can be one of those things where it's like, well, we just really want to check the box of we know that this is supposed to be an important thing. So just come and do that thing. You go, come do that thing
Yeah,
that you do, right?
yeah. And I have conversations and I ask, a lot of questions and I say, well, what you want is compliance. What you want is
Yeah.
legal compliance. You're not looking for a true diversity. You want something that you can report to the EEOC on your EEO2 report to
Yes.
show that you do have people of color.
Yeah. I see what
Does
you're
not
saying.
mean that you're including those people of color, and it doesn't mean that those people of color belong there. And it doesn't have to be
Mhm.
people of color. It can be, people who are differently abled
Yes.
or identify as queer, whatever it is.
Right, right, right. Okay.
So
All right.
yeah.
So this topic became a bit interesting to me because of 2020. I mean, back in the way back in the day, in my IBM days, I actually worked in diversity recruiting within IBM for a segment for technical recruiting, but that was in
Mhm,
my past. The
mhm,
the interest from a kingdom lens came to me in 2020 when it seemed like this is the only conversation. This was like the dominant conversation happening after the
mhm,
whole George Floyd murder took place, right?
mhm,
And it was so interesting to me to watch the conversations that were taking place about the topics around diverse, like the marketplace context. First, we were having conversations that were really just kind of at a neighborhood level, just kind of race conversations, generally speaking. But then I was watching the conversations, what was starting to happen from, okay, how are companies now responding to certain things? And then I would start to see there were these books that would just all of a sudden be in my newsfeed a million times, like, this is the book we're reading now, and this is Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility book, and this is, pick an author, right? There was a number of authors in these books that were coming up. So I was like, well, let me read, like, since this is like the conversation that's happening over and over again, let me pick up a couple of these books and
mhm,
like read, like, what is the conversation that's being had. And I don't know what you're a practitioner in this space. So you have a whole nother perspective than I do as kind of an observer of kind of the conversations, right? But as I was reading the books, like the most popular books, regardless of whether someone was a well-known conservative, a well-known liberal, or whatever,
mhm,
I would go and I'd find that there would be, I'm looking at this from a kingdom lens, and I'd read these books and I'm like, man, on this side, I'm reading this book and it's completely in condemnation and shame and creates a whole environment that creates more division, but there's still some truth in it. So it's like, okay, there's some truth up in here, but
mhm.
then it's like the whole atmosphere around it is just like, yeah, I can see why that only goes so far because this environment that's around it is rooted in things that are completely outside the nature of what's the goodness of God that's good for everybody, whether they believe in him
Right,
or not, right?
right,
And then on the other side, I'd be looking at, okay, so here's another popular book on this side, and I'd read that and I'd be like, there's some truth in here too, but they'd be
mhm,
creating this whole other atmosphere that it's like, so I'm curious to know, as a practitioner in this, how has the gospel, how has your understanding of the kingdom, how has your love and walk with Jesus informed how you create frameworks, in this as a consultant, and like how has this impacted you in your approach? Because as I read the stuff that's the popular stuff, I'm like, I want to see more Jesus. And I don't mean overtly Jesus. I mean his way and his heart in the midst of it.
right, right. Well, first, I probably pray more than I ever have,
Mm,
because this work is emotionally and mentally exhausting.
yeah.
And to be honest with you, I'm holy, but I'm still a whole lot of hood.
You're like, so even
And
more prayer
so
so that the whole that holy can come out stronger.
yeah, because
Yeah.
sometimes people will say things, and
Yeah.
you're like, did I hear you correctly? Do you want to repeat that?
Yeah.
And then you're saying that facetiously because you really don't want them to repeat that because you're like a minute from
Yeah.
hood.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
um, yeah, and so I think I pray more that God's words will speak to me and through me,
Yeah.
and that I will show that love. And even if I don't necessarily say to a person, Jesus loves you or anything like that,
Right.
I still want them to be able to feel that
Yes.
empathy and that um, compassion.
Yes.
One thing that I tell leaders all the time, being, having empathy is like this huge thing, and I'm like, no, I want you to move away from empathy because empathy just means you can relate to me.
Mhm.
What if you can't relate to me?
Now
The
what?
same thing with allyship. We're like, "Oh, I'm an ally. I understand you." What if you can't understand me? you haven't walked in my shoes. You haven't had the same experiences. So I don't need your empathy. I need your compassion because the compassion is I see you hurting. What can I do to ease your pain?
Mm, kingdom principle.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so you talked. So that's a really good example. This idea of, I empathize. It was like, but if you can't, okay, what does compassion look like? And there's an action, that's connected to
Hmm.
compassion. Then you
Hmm.
mentioned allyship. And I know that became at least to me, maybe it's been popular. You only start noticing things when you notice them. But for
Right.
me, this whole concept of allyship was super on my radar in 2020 and beyond, where it was like, it was the popular thing to say, I'm an ally,
Hmm.
I'm an ally, I'm an ally. I didn't even know what that meant exactly. Well, what do you mean you're an ally? What does that look like? What does that mean? I'm not exactly sure. There was books
Hmm.
about it, all the things. You wrote a book about allyship,
Hmm.
so that was a popular phrase, but you just said a second ago, well, you could say you're an ally. So what's the other side of that? So when you say I want you to move from empathy to compassion,
Hmm.
what's on the other side of I want you to move from an ally? Maybe define that for folks of
Hmm.
what you're saying when you say ally. And then what's the alternative to that?
And I agree with you. Allyship became like this huge
Like a
catchphrase.
buzzword.
Yes, the
Yeah.
empty buzzword back in 2020. And the reason why I wrote my book is because, and I will never forget this. I just come from the gym. I was at the grocery store, which is next door to the gym, and I'm just like trying to get my zucchini. And this white woman just walks up to me. She goes, I'm an ally. And I'm like, I'm just trying to squeeze a zucchini. Like,
Stop it.
and so, I asked her, I said, an ally to whom and according to whom?
Yes.
Just because you say you're something doesn't mean it's so.
And do we even know what does it even mean to you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're an ally to whom?
Yeah.
And her reaction just proved to me that that was just an empty catchphrase for her.
Interesting. Well,
And
actually, that's interesting on multiple levels. One, that there was an announcement about it when, that was
true
already
allies
weird.
don't need to announce, right? Their
That was already
words and
weird.
actions are aligned.
Yeah,
Hers
yeah,
was
yeah.
clearly misaligned. And that's what I teach my clients is like, you're saying staff members don't care what you say, they care what you do.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so it goes back to what Dr. Maya Angelou said, people will show you who they are.
Yes.
Believe them.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. And so it's that whole, I'm an ally. According to whom? And what have you done to prove that you're an ally? And then their response to that is always, I'm a good person. I'm a good person. Okay. So let's have a conversation about good. You're good according to whom and what makes you good because there's always sun and moonlight. So if you're good, then who's bad? And which
Right.
makes you good compared to this person, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying you're good and you're better than this person. What makes this person less than, right?
Yeah.
So I have those kind of conversations, and people, they will lose all color in their
Well,
skin,
I can
and
imagine pretty quickly. Because you
right. And
you
so I
you are
give
saying
it
you're asking a disruptive question very directly, and then someone has to figure out what they're gonna do with what you just said, right?
because it's subjective,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, it is.
Good is subjective. What does good mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So when they're like, "Well, I'm kind, I'm generous," I'm like, "So why not just say I'm kind and generous? Why is it this label of I'm good?"
That's interesting. So then what does it mean to be an like so what does it mean to be an ally? I mean, you wrote a book about it. You were breaking it
Mhm.
down. I did a quick scan through it. I remember you
Right.
talking about ally versus an advocate versus an accomplice, right?
Mhm.
So when we were talking about empathy, better than empathy is compassion, and that has an action. For you, ally on the other side of that is advocate. Would that be the correlation? Like instead of being an ally, which is like, okay, that sounds nice. It's just kind of a buzzword. It doesn't mean a whole lot. To advocate, would that be your answer? Is that like the correlation that moves you into an action as opposed to something that's maybe tougher to walk out?
Exactly. So for me, an ally is just someone who may enjoy Black culture. They can, and I had a former colleague who told me that he was more woke than I am because he listens to Beyonce.
That's interesting. Is by the way,
Yeah.
side point, is the word
Yeah.
ally, is that only typically used in the context of um other cultures with the black community? Is that does it have that tie? Or is it like, or is ally like
It
common, like
it
ally to a bunch of different communities or whatever?
it it can be both.
Oh, okay, cool. All right,
So
keep
the
going. I was just
origin of the
curious. I was
word,
curious.
yeah, so the root word of, or the origin word of ally is alligari, which means to unite,
Yes. I didn't know
to
that. Okay.
bind to.
To bind
And
to.
so to bind to. And so I had that conversation. Well, if you don't know me, how are you bound to me? So how can you say you're an ally? So the way I perceive it in 2023, when people say I'm an ally, to me that means, okay, so you are engaged in Black culture in some kind of way, either through sports, music, uh, interracial relationships, biracial children. You're connected to
Sure.
the culture some kind of way.
Right, right, right. Okay.
That does not necessarily mean that you don't have bigoted tendencies. And I hear this a lot from clients,
Yeah.
or people who attend my talks who are engaged in interracial relationships or have biracial children. The white women will come to me and be like, "Wow, I did not realize that I'm a bigot, or I didn't realize I'm a
Wow.
racist."
Wow.
Even my good friend, she's biracial, and she's like, "I just now realized, my siblings and I just realized that our mother is a racist."
Yeah.
Which is disheartening because, that's your mother, she loves you and
Absolutely.
you love her, and
Yeah.
she's now saying all of these things that are completely inappropriate and offensive
Yeah.
to you as a Black woman.
Yeah. Wow. So then what's the difference then between being an ally who may have just like this connection to
Mhm.
community and then actually being an advocate?
Okay, so let me ask you a question.
Please bring it.
Have you had an experience where maybe you and a white colleague were in a meeting and something was said and you were expecting this colleague to speak up on your behalf and they did nothing?
I can't think of a work related instance where I've had that, but I have had that happen outside of the workplace. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Same difference,
Same thing.
right?
Right.
you know an ally is just someone who's like, I'm connected to Black people or brown people, BIPOC, uh, other marginalized communities, whatever,
Sure.
but I am not going to advocate for you in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I need you to speak up on my behalf. I
Yeah.
need you to help me to get to where I need to get to, where I want to go.
Right.
um you know so it's like pie. I like cheesecake. Okay, let's change the pie to cheesecake.
Okay. I like cheesecake.
So, if there's just a okay, so you used to work in the corporate workspace,
Yes.
and of course, we all remember when there's extra food in the break room, and you get the emails, "Hey, there's food."
Yeah.
Well, an ally is just going to be like, "There's food." Okay, great, fine. An ally is either going to come to your desk before they send that email, or they're going to fix you a plate.
Oh, you mean the advocate? You meant the advocate?
Yeah, I'm sorry, the advocate.
Yes.
Yes, they're
Okay.
going to fix
Yes.
you a plate,
Yes. Yes. There's
and
so
then
it's the act. So the
the
action
action.
is the core difference.
Absolutely.
And I go back because I keep making these connections between, what what do we see Jesus model? So because if you think about what that looks like, compassion is an action word. Love is an action word. Advocacy rooted in that actually is love. That also is an action word, right? And
Mhm,
it's like to
mhm.
care, like to show care.
Right.
And so the
Absolutely.
key is
So
around
think about
the
think about
action.
the man who was disabled and his friends lowered him from the roof.
Yes, 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 yes.
That is an advocate
That was an
behavior.
advocate.
Right. And Jesus healed him just because of his friends.
Yes, yes,
Right?
yes.
So,
Yeah, that was next level. Like that was a great example because that was next level. They're like, we're gonna put a hole, we're gonna cut the hole up in
uh-huh.
this roof, and we're gonna make sure our friend
Right.
can see Jesus.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. That's the advocate.
That's good. Now, I
Yes.
teased this because I said in your book, you had said ally, advocate, and then accomplice was the third
Accomplice.
one.
Mhm.
So, if advocate is already like an action oriented, showing care, all of those things, then what's that next level where it's like, I'm an accomplice at this point?
The accomplice is the person who's willing to give up their financial or social capital for someone else's benefit.
What is social capital?
Their position, right? So think about um, uh, Serena Williams' husband. I can't think of
Yes. Yeah, I can't.
Alexis. Oh,
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
He actually gave up his position because he was like, we need to diversify this role and we need to have a person of color in this position. So he walked away from that position to make space for someone else.
Wow.
And a lot of people aren't going to do that. They're
Right.
not willing to give up a contract, a position, a promotion because they know that someone can do the job better than they can.
Okay, so you just said two. Okay, I got like three thoughts going on in my head at the same
Go
time.
ahead.
Okay, so one, the kingdom concept that I just heard you use is radical generosity. So your action is actually pretty radically generous because you are actually giving up something. You talked about social capital. You are taking yourself out of the running or out of the benefit, personal benefit of something in order to create opportunity for someone else. And so to me,
Mhm,
that's radical generosity. That's Jesus all day, right?
mhm.
So that's good. And not everybody can or will do that in particular
Right.
context or whatever. But
Mhm.
the other thing that you said that stood out to me is you said, because and I know, and I think it was important that you said that, because some people, when you just said what you said, when they heard it, if you hadn't added that comment of someone who actually had the qualifications, then I find that this conversation, because I worked in diversity for so long, can get really weird because depending on someone's mindset or their experiences, they can immediately go to, oh, this was just about putting someone in it and having nothing to do with or not enough to do with their qualifications,
Right.
right? And it's like, no, that's not what we're talking about here, right?
Mhm.
There is someone who's saying there's someone who is way that is well suited for this work. And I am going to give up my position in order to make something happen, make something available for somebody else.
Right.
And so what are some other examples of like, so I'm trying to think through like social capital. So that could be financial,
Mhm.
right? It could be, it could be an opportunity, whether that's a job, it could be something with finances where you might make a decision that
Mhm.
means that there's a sacrifice on your personal part that allows increase for somebody else.
Absolutely.
So to me,
Absolutely.
I'm seeing collaboration and radical generosity. Those are my two
Mhm.
kingdom words for accomplice.
Mhm. Absolutely. And it's so interesting because people, so I work with a lot of executive leaders
Yes.
and I have those hard conversations.
Yeah.
And first thing I'll ask them, how did you get your position? Right? And they'll be in the position for 15, 20 years, 25, whatever. And I would say a good 95% of the time is because they knew someone who knew someone. Nepotism. And so
Relationship. Yeah.
I will ask them, I said, so do you mean to tell me that you had no experience in marketing before you got this job as chief marketing officer? Like you're making how many hundreds of thousands a year and you had no experience before you got this job,
Right.
right? But because of nepotism. But again, it goes back to what I said earlier that most white men don't like they'll apply for a job even if they don't have the experience.
Right. I've heard that about
But people
I've seen some interesting stats around men versus women. I mean,
right,
forget race for a second. That
right.
men versus women, that women are way less likely
To apply
to
for a job if we don't
to
have
apply
at
for a
least
job if they don't
80%.
have the
Yep,
majority of
yep.
the boxes ticked off on the list
Exactly.
on the thing. But
Exactly.
men tend to
Exactly.
just go for it, right?
Exactly. Exactly. But it's usually white men who, if they
Yes.
feel like we have 20%, we're gonna apply for it.
Yeah.
Women and people of color, we don't.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Um, so I'm thinking about social capital again, and we talked about like from a job context, from an opportunity, financial, or what have you. And I'm thinking about relationships because you just talked about nepotism, right? There's
Mhm.
also the relationship aspect, the generosity of relationship, where I know these folks, and this has been a benefit to my life relationally. But
Mhm.
even though, I think that, I'm going to basically give up some of my social capital in relationships to others so that they are then presented with opportunity that otherwise maybe I would only because it's my relationship.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's generosity of. So I have this thing that I talk about all the time is how in the kingdom we're supposed to be distribution centers in the kingdom of God. So that means
Mhm.
that there's all these resources. God's the source. There's all these resources, and that we have to have this open handedness. That's like I can receive resources, I can give resources, open handed on both sides. So if God calls for it, I can give it up, right?
Mhm.
And I can also gracefully receive it. So having that
Right.
kind of open flow through on both sides. But
Mhm.
all of us have like resources. And so when I think about this idea of being um, an accomplice, which is next level, to me, that's like, that is straight kingdom all day. Because if we're radically generous with the resources that we have, whatever those resources are,
Mhm.
financial, relational, whatever,
Right.
then our generosity in that is exactly at the heart of God. So I think
Oh,
this is where,
absolutely.
so first of all, give me a reaction to that. And then I want to ask you something else.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. I actually received an award from the University of Washington last year,
Yeah.
last October, the Alumni Mentoring Award. And I was nominated because some of my former students were like, we graduated, we reached back out to Dr. Harden. We're like, hey, we need some experience, or what do you recommend, so on and so forth. And I've always hired former students to get the experience. It's like, okay, you want to be whatever it is you want to be.
Yeah.
How can I help you get to that level?
Right.
Right. I know, and I'm sure you do as well, you can't get a job until you get experience.
Right. Right. That's
Right.
simply the way it
Which
works.
is
Yeah.
which is crazy. It's like
Yeah.
you won't give me the job because I don't have experience, but I can't get experience until you give me the job.
Right. Right.
And so I was like, okay, you can work for me for 3 months or 6 months or whatever, so you can get the experience.
Good.
Then you go out and you get the job.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so I've had a lot of students work for me part time just to get that experience, to get them to that next level. I coach them, I mentor them. He's like, you want to be a public speaker? Okay, we're gonna work on this. Let's
Yes.
get it. And so, the fact that they went and nominated me for this award that I received last October was just, a great feeling. That it was
Yeah.
even my Teacher of the Year award.
Yeah.
It was because students nominated me
Yes, yes,
because they're
because
like,
you're investing your resource into others and creating opportunities for them.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
all of it, and so this kind of idea about privilege, which shows up in lots of contexts, whether it's a racial perspective or not. Like there's many privileges that I have as a
mm-hmm.
Black female. I have
Right,
privileges, everyone
right,
has a privilege of some sort. But the bottom
right,
line is, if you're leveraging that privilege, going back to the accomplice thing, if you're
mm-hmm,
leveraging that privilege, and which is like not a bad word, it's like, okay,
mm-hmm,
that if you're leveraging that privilege to create opportunities for others in a
right,
radically generous way,
mm-hmm,
then awesome. And if you take that concept, that general kingdom concept, and then look at patterns, history, structural, institutional things or whatever, you
mm-hmm,
can take that same concept and apply it to these various areas where you talk about, whether
absolutely,
it be, underrepresentation in an area or marginalization in an area or what have you. You can
mm-hmm,
take these same concepts and
mm-hmm.
then apply it in those contexts. That's what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. I mean, there have been so there's two words that people bristle. I don't I don't know why they bristle.
Yeah.
People dislike the word privilege
Right.
and they dislike the word bias.
Mm.
And every human being has
All
both.
of us. Right. Yes. It's not a bad word. It just is.
It may be various degrees of privilege,
Yes.
but we all have it.
Yes.
If you have a roof over your head, that's a privilege.
Yes.
If you can see or you can afford glasses to see, that's a privilege,
Yes.
right? So the fact that people are like, I don't have any privilege. Well, you do.
Yeah, you do. We all do. Right.
You all do, right?
Right.
I'm not biased. Yes, you are. We all
Yes.
are,
Yes. We
right?
all have
We all have our things
prejudices.
that's going to make us, freeze, fight, or flee.
Yeah.
And so they're like, I'm not biased. You are. You are. Even if you see a pit bull running down the street towards you and you run, that's a sign of bias.
Yes. Yes.
That you're biased towards pit bulls
Yes. And it
because
could
you
be one of
wouldn't
those
run
really
for
friendly
a
pit
chihuahua.
bulls that's not even going to hurt you. It just want to play with you.
Exactly.
You
You
don't
would you
know.
run for a chihuahua?
Right.
You wouldn't run for a chihuahua, right? So that means we have bias towards pit bulls versus chihuahuas.
Yes. Someone argued that that was wisdom and not bias, but it's still bias.
Well, I don't know. Some of those chihuahuas now, you'd be like,
Oh
they
my
can
gosh,
bite your
man, that's
ankles
so
real
funny.
good.
That's so funny. I think part of when I think about just kind of big picture and when I say big picture, I'm just going to say United States for a second. So when I think about some of the tension that we're kind of dealing with in our nation, that I think those tensions have just continued to increase. They ebb and they flow and they increase or whatever over these last handful of years. And I think about these concepts that we're talking about, which often then get, put in political camps, but these things aren't political. Like what we're talking about is not a political thing. These are concepts that help people flourish, period. But then, this is why I'm like, politics is a stronghold. As soon as politics enters the conversation, then we might agree conceptually on this should happen, but then our own political biases then create this tension that stalls progress that would help everybody. So I feel like there's a lot of tension from the perspective that I'll just take this for example. So like the so Democrats tend to fall on the wanting government to do more things. So these same concepts, they're wanting government in some cases do a whole lot of this. Like we will be the ones, we'll be
Mhm,
the source. We will be
mhm,
the source of making sure that all of these things happen.
mhm.
And then Republicans, they're like, listen, we don't want government up in anything. Y'all figure it out. And if they're a believer in the Republican, they're like, listen, this is all on you and your family, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. This is all about the family and we don't need the government
Yeah,
in it or whatever.
yeah.
And neither of those things are the right answer. It's all of it. And so I feel like part of the challenge that we have as a nation, which is why I think it's so important that there's kingdom people across the spectrum of all of this stuff, is that a lot of ways that we'd flourish is in the tension of identifying those places where it makes sense that all of us tax-paying people are creating opportunities and there's things that are laws or this or whatever that take place, but then not looking at the government to have to go through the government to make all of these things happen when there's some things that like let's just continue to I'm just talking to kingdom people for a second.
Mhm.
Let's operate like kingdom people in all the places and the spaces that we're in, and then be atmosphere shifters where things actually happen because you've got heart issues and you got things that just need to be handled,
Right,
institutionally or legislatively or whatever. What are your
right.
thoughts about my rants?
Woo! I can talk about this all day, every day. Um, religion is the most politicized thing ever in the United States. The fact that nuns can wear their garments and head coverings and all of that, not a big deal. But as soon as you see a woman wearing hijab, she's other. That's just that she's not, she doesn't believe in God. Well,
Right.
she does. She just may not believe in the same God that you do,
Right.
right? The fact that Democrats wants to be a little bit more compassionate than Republicans, and you're hurting. How can we assist you?
Mhm.
Whereas Republicans are the opposite. Um, I mean, it's true. I mean, they keep saying, "Oh, we want to take away a woman's right to have abortions." For me, it's not whether or not you agree with abortions or not, but what are you going to do after the child is born?
Mhm.
You don't offer health care. You don't offer child care. You don't offer free lunch programs, all of the things that children need to
Right.
thrive.
Right.
So it's not about being pro-life. It's about being pro-birth.
It goes that whole like compassion that goes across.
Right.
That's just for human flourishing and getting in that tension of it's not
Exactly.
all this and it's not all that. That's exactly an
Exactly.
example of what you gave,
Exactly.
where it's like, well, what does this look like? And
Right.
what else comes up
I
for
mean,
you?
even with healthcare, I mean, the fact that President Biden finally negotiated on the prescription rates.
Okay.
My mom was diabetic.
Yeah.
Her medic she had to take shots 4 times a day.
Right.
That adds up.
Yeah.
And people who could afford it, not a big deal, right?
Right.
But people who are on a fixed income, they need these subsidies.
Yeah.
They need lower health care and prescription costs. And we shouldn't have to like go to Canada to get it or have to
Right.
order it online from somewhere. We shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So, and the whole thing of pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Okay, well, you're assuming that we have boots. You're assuming that we have feet. I
Right.
mean,
And some
right?
people
So
don't. Right,
so
right.
there's a lot of assumptions, right?
Yeah.
So
So there's
and
just like this goodness. That's why I'm like, there's the tension in it because there's some real goodness. That's why I don't like politics, but I believe that, but the kingdom of God can operate within this spaces, but it's such a political stronghold because it's not reality. Neither of these no extremes are reality.
Right.
So it's
Right.
just like it's somewhere up in here
Right.
of getting the tension of the
Right.
goodness of a thought process and
Right.
ideology here and the
Right.
goodness of a thought process and ideology there and kind of
Right.
dealing with the tension. That's why I was like,
Right.
listen, I had, and I'll let you go, but I remember in 2020 and in the midst of all of these things, I was ranting on Facebook. I had this hashtag kingdom over everything. That was back then, and now I got a podcast called that.
Yeah.
And I was saying
Great.
that's why we can't say things like you can't call yourself a Christian and be a pick your party, right? Like we can't say that because by saying that we're putting Jesus in the box of a political structure. When it's like actually wherever you are, wherever you're leaning, wherever whatever, there's goodness that we learn and model out and can walk out even in culture
Right.
that we can learn from the kingdom and
Mm-hmm.
apply. And if we would actually like negotiate the tension of that versus having to be like, I'm all on this camp. So everything that this camp says, I'm in complete agreement because I can't, or on this side, I got to be wholesale and I will fight. I will
Right.
fight things that don't even make sense,
Right.
that aren't even in alignment on either
Right.
side because I'm so rooted in this thought process. We will be so much better. Everyone will be so much better for
Yeah,
it.
I mean, we all should have a growth mindset. We should
Yeah.
continue to read and grow and pray and
Yeah.
do all of the things that we need to do. But the first and only contract that I've ever been terminated from was a Christian school.
Okay. So you got it. So if you have a few minutes, tell me more because I want to know more
Yes.
about this. Okay.
So they hired me to train faculty on DEI. And
Okay.
so we were having monthly sessions. And literally, so I asked them to begin with, does the board of trustees agree with this? Are
Right.
they okay with this?
Right.
Yes, it's great. It's fine. No problem. So we signed the contract. And then when the former president lost re-election,
Mm-hmm.
I get an urgent, hey, could we meet real quick? Yeah, sure, fine. Well, we need to cancel your contract. We're gonna pay you out of the contract. Well, of course you are. But
Because it was a contract.
the board is really upset, because their preferred candidate lost. And I said, so you mean to tell me that the board is canceling all DEI initiatives simply because their preferred candidate lost? Like,
Did they give you any more insight into that? Because I don't even see the connection. So
that was all that was
that was all
said.
you
And
got?
and I was like scratching my head, like, you're a Christian organization.
Right.
All the trustees are supposedly Christian,
Yeah.
but yet you're can't. And the funny, well, not funny, but the interesting thing was at the end of every session, I would back up every single thing that I said with the
With
scripture.
scripture. Yeah.
And I said according, I would always have like 3 to 5 scriptures. I'm like, this, and this. This is how it applies to this. Do the little
Yeah.
diagram, all the things.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, the board is not supportive of this anymore. But
That's
you were
really
supportive of it
interesting.
last year
Yeah.
when it was so bizarre.
That is bizarre
Um,
because it's like the
yeah,
topic is the topic, so it really doesn't matter.
right. But as a
Right.
result of them canceling the contract, several administrators left.
Yeah,
They're
wow.
like, and they said you're being very performative. Your words and your actions are
Yeah.
misaligned. You're saying that you support DEI and you're believing in Christian principles, but yet you're terminating this contract because your preferred candidate lost. Like, how does that even make
Yeah,
sense? So they
that
lost a lot
doesn't
of
compute.
great people as a
Yeah, that
result.
goes back into the entanglement issue that we have, and
Not the
so the
entanglement, not
entanglements,
Jada and them.
the religious and political entanglement stronghold is what I call it. You want to talk
Yeah,
intersectionality, religion, politics, yeah,
yeah.
it's a tough one. You know what? This I appreciate your candor and just sharing your story. This has been really good. I love just being able to hear, like, as I'm hearing just kingdom frameworks in the midst of kind of how you're walking this out and seeing how that gets to inform the approach to what we're talking about. So this is good. I'm actually hoping to have a few conversations on this topic with a few folks because I think that there's a lot to explore in the midst of it. And I thank you
Mhm.
for joining me today. How do people, if people want more information about what you're doing, want to connect, where do they go?
They can go to my website, hardenconsultinggroup.com.
hardenconsultinggroup.com. All right. Dr.
Or they
Kimberly,
can connect with me on social media as well.
and social media, where are your
Mhm.
what are your top platforms that you're involved on?
Honestly, I hate social media. That's why I'm rolling my eyes like, why did I even say social media?
That's hilarious. Like, don't follow my social profiles because I don't even want to be there.
So I'm more active on LinkedIn professionally,
Yeah.
but the trash talking version of me personally is on Facebook. So
so,
I don't want your people to follow my trash
so are
talking.
you saying that your holy and professional side is on LinkedIn and
My hood
your
side is
hood
on
side is on Facebook? Is that what you just said to me?
pretty much.
So
The authentic me is on Facebook.
you're like, so you're gonna get all of me, and holy with a little bit of hood and professional, all the things that are me. You will find that on
The
Facebook.
eyebrow raise,
Yeah,
the side eye, all of that
you'll get
is
all of
me
that
on Facebook.
on Facebook, or you can go right onto our website. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. Enjoyed our chat.
My pleasure, Shae.